Hello, I'm Hannah Durden and you're listening to the Outdoors Group podcast. This podcast is a call to arms to get children and young people outside again. Whether you're an educator, parent, carer or just an interested party, this podcast is for you. Each week I'll be talking to a different guest about different aspects of the outdoors, from forest school provision to the importance of play, from specialist provision for young people with additional needs to empowering the next generation of environmental protectors. In several of our podcast episodes, we've talked about the concept of learning through failure and of reassuring children that it's okay to fail, to get things wrong and to learn from those mistakes and try again another time. This episode is a great example of that. We were using some new recording equipment and although we'd done some tests with it, you'll hear that the microphones weren't set up as adequately as they could be, so there's a bit of discrepancy in the volume of the voices of the different guests. Also, we thought we'd found ourselves a nice quiet room at the school. But as it happened, some students were putting together some furniture nearby, so the first 10 to 12 minutes of the podcast there was a bit of background noise, but do persevere because I promise you that does go and that the conversation is definitely still worth listening to. I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. Thanks very much. Today I'm delighted to be sitting down with Rosie Molton, who's a Masters student at the University of Exeter, and our directors Tom and Shev. We've come together because of the dissertation topic that Rosie's chosen. She's been doing some work with us at the Outdoors School to kind of back up what she's doing, and I think the best way to do it actually is to start by Rosie just getting you to tell us what your dissertation title is and why you chose this as a kind of area of study.
So I've been looking at how does the use of outdoor learning environments with autistic learners benefit the adults who work with them. So there was sort of 4 reasons really for choosing this. First of all, I've been working in outdoor learning for the last 7 years, and so doing something about outdoor learning made sense to me because I was quite passionate about it. I've been working with and enabling learners with disabilities through Cue to Speech Association, so working with deaf learners. So trying to sort of combine those 2 interests, and then kind of decided that actually looking at the well-being side of it, because I've had personal difficulties with my own mental health whilst I've been at work through work-related stress and anxiety, so kind of seeing if what I experienced was a generic thing and a problem across this sort of sector, or whether it was sort of my specific circumstances, and kind of, investigating that. And then I changed my tack from sort of deaf education aspects through, because I worked on a project called Nature Friendly Schools, which worked with teachers and schools that were trying to develop their school grounds. Okay. And then they, as part of that, were able to go on a residential course, and I ran some of those residentials, predominantly for the special schools that were all based in the southwest. And that's kind of led to the focus on autistic learners, because most of them had a high frequency of autistic learners within their sort of special school mix, some solely for autistic learners.
And so the Masters is in special education, is that the
final year? So Masters in education, but focusing on special educational needs.
And why did you choose to look at the benefits on the adults rather than the kids?
Partly because of my own experience with working outdoors and seeing whether it was some of the problems that I'd encountered and noticed, particularly through COVID and things. Sort of I'd taken on a wellbeing role within where I work, seeing if they were problems in different outdoor learning settings, or whether different education settings had different ways of managing those kind of things. And also because it's not been done before. So there's no research, or very little research, on looking at the adults who work with special educational needs.
Yeah.
So there's general stuff about adults being outside, there's general stuff about teachers and their well-being, but there's no kind of linking the two.
So that's quite exciting, so it's quite groundbreaking.
Yeah, hopefully it's a sort of initial kind of step into this sort of area to lead to other things.
So Shev and Tom, I'll bring you guys in. From your experience of both working with learners yourself and now obviously essentially being in charge of a school, what do you think the benefits are for staff of being outdoors when they're working with these learners? Or like, what have you observed or experienced yourselves?
I think for me it can be a blessing and a curse. I think there are times in the darkest part of winter when it's freezing cold and wet, and the weight of responsibility of looking after learners and coping with the environment can be tough.
Yeah.
I think the opposite is also true. You get the benefits of the long warm days in summer and spring, and that's really kind of good for the soul, I think. In terms of the learners, I think you get a lot less of the sensory issues with learners outdoors, especially autistic learners, because their sensory needs are being met by the environment better. And so I think you, as an educator, you start to see the educational gains, be that social, emotional or academic, much quicker with those learners, because you're able to get to that learning faster, because the environment is working with you and helping. And I think that's a real positive for all educators, really. That's what we want to be doing, is being impactful with learners. So I think that is a big takeaway from it all. And I think, finally, as a kind of opening thought, I think a big part of the kind of premise that it is positive rather than a negative experience, it stems from making sure that we're working with nature, not just in nature. If you're trying to do classroom-based work outside, you're setting yourself up to fail. Yeah. Whereas if you're actually working with the natural environment and you change your practice to do that, then I think that the benefits are huge.
Would you add anything to that, Tom?
I would echo a lot of that, and just to kind of embellish some of the points. I think one of the nuts we are trying to crack is setting practitioners up to succeed, because it's a different way of thinking, it's a different way of being, it's a different way of managing your approach, and in different situations behavioural issues might play out in different ways, and how you adapt traditional teacher training is not necessarily, like, some of it will be relevant, but some of it needs to be adapted really to suit this approach properly. So a lot of it is the training for staff and setting them up to succeed in the first place, for those benefits to shine through, because inevitably there will be tricky days. But on some of the rainiest days, I've had some of the most fantastic toddler groups, for example, where they're using the drips and the rain to do loads of creative play and do loads of peer-on-peer experiential learning, just with a downpour of rain, and actually turns into a very positive experience. And actually, some days in the heat and the sunshine, actually goes round. It goes round full circle, and that can just be overbearing and tiring. So there's no set agenda, and the way you have to be responsive to everything. If you're in the right mindset and as a practitioner, it can really inspire the day, or it can have that negative downward spiral. And I think it's in the training and development, and also the kind of the pedagogy you're trying to implement. And I think it's got to come right the way across what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve, and that is not common practice. And so the training available and the sharing of best practice. So yeah, we recently had the SEN conference, and one of my takeaways was this idea of choice. And I think you're very limited in an indoor environment of what choice you can offer. And so that becomes like a big tool to use, but obviously the weather and conditions are a choice you have no control of. But I think understanding that concept is really valuable, and I think I think we get greater choice of how we operate and where we are, and how that can flow into learning is much wider and can suit more people's needs in the outdoors. So that is a big positive to hold on to.
I was just going to say, it sounds like you both think that maybe getting to teachers as they're becoming teachers, so it's part of the training, is quite important, yeah?
Yeah, I think it's not obvious through current teacher training and practice to understand how to use an outdoor environment. I think a lot of teachers take a class outside and suddenly go, everything I know about teaching and behaviour has gone out the window because I don't know how to control a group outside, or I don't know how to direct the learning. I don't have the kind of resources that I've been taught to use. And so yeah, I do think that the kind of teacher training element is really key. You know, it's a big part of it, but also I think a lot of it is just about schools and school leadership in particular, just having the courage to let teachers go outside and that be a bit messy, because actually the kids will kind of show you how it works. If you are willing to kind of go on that journey with them, they will help you to learn how to teach them outside. I think that's kind of what Tom was getting at with the idea of the kind of choice, and it's a big part of our approach around being learner-led. It is all about that
choice. Rosie, from that kind of what you've studied so far in the observations, is that kind of echoed by what these guys have said?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's sort of two threads to it really. There's the generic or general kind of aspect of sort of stresses and strains within education and the outdoor sectors in general, and with COVID, the issues of staffing and illness and trying to meet the needs of learners through, with small staff numbers at times has been really key. I think from autism specific kind of attitude, that idea of choice, that idea of being learner led, and it was something Andy Smith said at the conference, was about not being able to put his hood up and light sensitivity.
Oh, that really resonated.
And I know that he mentioned it in the podcast they did with you as well, but his sort of challenges within the school environment and those things, being outdoors, you can put your hood up, and I think the mindset of the people who work outside is very different, because they don't see the fact that a learner wants to put their hood up as a problem, which is kind of ingrained in a lot of teachers, and in sort of society almost, that it's antisocial to have your hood up. Well, actually it might be the way that they can be social, because the light is a problem, not the communication.
Antisocial is stick your glary lights on.
And a lot of classrooms, the lighting is terrible, and fake, and the education sector really struggle with the maintenance of buildings, and the lights are flickering or whatever have you. And for people who haven't got specific sensory needs, it's hard enough to concentrate or focus or whatever. So I think that aspect of it, and the kind of, I think one of the key things that I found is that pretty much everyone that I spoke to or interviewed, observed through the questionnaires, pretty much everyone was positive about being outside and working with learners outside. There was only one person who wasn't, but they didn't offer any sort of rhyme or reason for it, which was unfortunate really, because it would been really interesting to look at.
Just to jump in there, because working with some of the schools, we've had some of the assistants have come along, and we work a lot with campfires, and generally our sites are quite muddy and that is quite a barrier for people that like not to smell like campfires at the end of the day, and not to have dirt under their nails, and that's their preferred way of being. And would the people that you've interviewed all be outdoor practitioners, or was there a selection indoor as well?
So it was quite interesting. So there was people from special schools that do sort of both, work outdoors and indoors. Actually, all the 3 people that I spoke that worked in special schools all had access to quite extensive grounds, and they were at different levels as well, or in different roles within different special schools. And then people from mainstream as well, and then outdoors, either forest school, sort of continually leading forest schools to different groups, or the outdoor schools. So it was quite a nice broad range actually.
Yeah. It sounds like you spoke to quite a few people.
Yeah, and it was really inspiring actually that particularly one of the people I spoke to was in senior management in a special school, and they were so enthusiastic and engaged with the outdoors, and it was exactly what you were saying, Shev, that the sort of management needs to be on board to be able to allow it.
It's really interesting. I was going to actually ask, because mine and Tom's premise is that it's positive, that whether you'd found that through the research. It's interesting that you did. I wonder, given that there's a kind of overwhelming consensus that it is positive, why aren't more schools doing more of it? What do you think the barriers are?
Yeah, so I suppose that was the second part of my research really, was looking at the barriers, partly due to sort of management, so having to tick boxes to get certain things. So the curriculum is so extensive that
there's no time to do
anything else. There's no time to do anything else. So for example, one person commented that because they work with in primary, sort of mid-primary, they're able to go outside, they're able to take lessons outside, because if they don't achieve what they want to in one lesson, it doesn't matter, there's that flexibility. Whereas when they were teaching year 5-6, then it was all focused around the exams, and everything that was creative, everything that was engaging to the learners got put back until that last kind of half term, that after the exams. So any school trips, any sort of outdoor learning experiences, visits, just being outside, their forest school curriculum, was all put back until that last half term after the exams had been done. And actually they've spent 3/4 of the year focusing on these exams that don't really mean a lot for the kids.
Interesting. So
I was just wondering, that would be, I can see how that thought process goes down that line if you're a teacher and you've got that pressure. And one of my big kind of bugbears with education is it's not evidence-led. So is there evidence to suggest that if you do an A/B test, the learners that had their extracurricular activities and still had that focus on creative subjects throughout the year consistently, would they significantly underperform at exams? I honestly doubt it, but it would be interesting if there was actually evidence-led to adopt that approach, because my idea behind that would be actually your brain needs to rest just like any other muscle, and there's a lot of creativity and what have you will play into all those subjects, and learning is not in that isolated little block that is maths or whatever we're heading towards with our tests. So
I think, I mean, we all know from our experiences that we can't just keep going, you know, and sometimes a change is as good as a rest, but sometimes you do need a rest.
But if you look at the world leaders in education, you know, in the Scandinavian countries, they have a lot of outdoor time, a lot of creativity. So if we're looking at evidence-led approaches, you know, where Forest Schools was born out of, so maybe I'm biased, but I feel confident that actually, breaking it up over the year and having a more immersive kind of approach would be better.
Sure, yeah. I'd actually go, I was going to go a question further back than that. Okay. Actually, if we're saying that the curriculum is a big barrier, then is the push to put outdoor learning in the PE curriculum and write outdoor experience into the curriculum and the Institute of Outdoor Learning, learning outside the classroom, all of these initiatives that are trying to bring outdoor learning and outdoor time into the curriculum, is that a lost cause because the curriculum is the barrier? Do we need to kind of rethink the whole approach nationally, or do you think that actually could work? That is a way in?
I think it's twofold. I think short term it's probably the way in, and teachers, you know, that was one of the things that teachers said to me, was that they wanted, those who didn't work outdoors wanted specific time to be able to do that because they knew how beneficial it was for their learners and for them. But ultimately there's too much there's too much pressure, and if we're talking specifically about the well-being of our education staff, which research has shown, particularly in sort of special education, there's a high burnout, high compassion fatigue, because they naturally care about the learners. You wouldn't do the job if you didn't.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But actually that then opens you up to caring too much, and then
taking home all the baggage.
And just going back in each day and it building, and you know, people are really want to do well, and the stress is from not knowing how to do well in a lot of cases. So that was something that people who hadn't worked with autistic or other SEND learners before, that's what they wanted training on, was how to include them with the outdoors. And that learner, even though they were used to the learner-led approach, kind of knowing what other things did they need to be aware of to allow them to be able to do that in a safe way. But actually that they found once that they kind of got started on it, actually it just happened and it worked exactly how they wanted it to work, and now it's their best part of the week. But the stress was always that.
So do you think from that kind of staff well-being perspective, is there more that can be done with the training, or is it more about staff having the courage to give it a go and be supported in kind of making that leap?
I think there needs to be some more training, whether that's specifically, you know, a SEND specific training about outdoor learning, or training how to use their local space. So, you know, they've got the school field, but like you said, taking a maths lesson just outside doesn't work.
No.
But how can you use the outside space to do your maths lesson? What angles can you find in the playground? All those kind of things. That kind of teaching them how to use the environment that they've got, and also teaching them to, one of the other key things was teaching them to see the learning that's happening in play and in sort of general being outside, and how learners work together and what they're doing. So primary teachers are quite good at it and quite good at seeing the learning happening and being able to pick out those boxes, those sort of soft skills.
Do you think that that ability helps staff well-being?
I think it does, because they're not pressured then. They're not trying to go, oh well, we've got this outdoor learning session and then we're going to tick all these 4 boxes.
Cram all of this into it and we don't know how to map.
You waste all your other time for cramming everything else that we need to do back in the classroom.
They just feel rushed by being outdoors has taken time away, and then they feel the pressure elsewhere because they've got to deliver more.
Whereas actually being able to pick out the learning, actually a lot of the stuff that you are cramming into that other time that you've got left because you've done outdoor learning this week, actually there's a whole lot that you don't have to do, or using, referring to the outdoor learning that you've had, that the experience, whatever the experience is that the learners have had, using that when you're back in the classroom and how to use that. And, we're really lucky here in Devon that we've got lots of schools have got lots of space, but they just don't know how to use it.
So training's key.
Training's really key, I think, for staff wellbeing, but also for encouragement and support, and not just training for the staff who are delivering it, but training for managers to show them how it works and what they're getting out of it and what they can get out of it, from both the staff and the learner perspective, because there are a lot of people who have not had that experience, have been brought up in the system of education, trained in the system of education where outdoor learning wasn't a big thing, or was used for specific subjects and not for a wider.
I mean, it's kind of all backed up by theory anyway, isn't it? Your scaffolding off experience. We know, the research shows that learning in a new or novel environment helps embed learning better. It ticks off visual, auditory and kinesthetic learning all at once, and you're tapping into memory in a completely different way. So it's like the research has kind of been done, but the leap hasn't been made to actually let's use this effectively. Do you think there's more that could be done around that? Do you think that's an approach that makes sense?
Yeah, I think that it's the freedom, or the perceived freedom, that people object to, because they feel like, and I know I get this when I'm at work, that you feel like you are being paid to deliver a product and you should be doing something. But actually sometimes sitting back and doing nothing is exactly what you need to do. And I was on the coast the other week, and actually the learners that I were with they were 17, 18, from London, not really seen the coast. What did I do? I took them for fish and chips. Allowed them that opportunity to get an ice cream, sit on the beach.
So often in forest school, like your forest school session is working the way it should when, as a forest school leader, you are stood around drinking coffee. It's like that's
the end of the day.
Exactly, because then it's doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, and just being sat back and also giving the freedom. Something that one of the participants said was that when they were in school and working, so when they're in the classroom, they're attached to their computer, they're working, they're doing their own thing while supporting the learner, but they've got things to fill in or trying to respond to emails at the same time and things like that. When they're outside, all they have to do is listen to the learner. All they are there for is to be with that learner. And so the conversations that they have and the bonding and the openness of the learner is greater, because they don't feel like they're interrupting. But also, like what I find it on the coast, just walking at a different speed with a different person, then you have a really interesting open conversation. You find out something about this person, and a lot of the learners I'm working with aren't autistic or with special needs, but they you know, they still need that, and they still need that personal connection. And going for a walk with someone allows you to open up those opportunities.
Back at the conference, they put on that thing about the triangle of trust, and it's those moments where trust is developed, and we need that. Like, we're looking at our hierarchy of needs. If we're going to get to the real good stuff, I think trust is that one of the gateways that needs to be opened up for really effective learning. And I feel as practitioners, like, greater weight should be allowed for that. And I feel as well that trust helps that behaviour management in the situations. It's that bond, it's that connection that can allow you the confidence to go outside more. And I think
it's really interesting that you said practitioner, because I'd literally just written down, like, teacher versus facilitator. Like, is there something in the language we're using that's setting expectations up the wrong way?
I was just about to say that as well. Is it a cultural issue about what education looks like? And
Yeah.
that, again,
Yeah.
is the difference
Because
between
I think a lot of outdoor learning
Mm.
is about facilitating.
Yeah.
It's going on a learning journey with the people that you're with.
Yeah.
It's not you in charge leading the learning, and that's a real shift, I think. And I wonder whether even something as simple as the words teacher actually sets up the perception slightly the wrong way.
Yeah, I suppose so. I always refer to myself as a facilitator. I would never class myself as a teacher.
No.
And I've always said I don't want to be a teacher.
And yet we've got a nation of educators who call themselves teachers.
I was going to say, presumably most of the people you spoke to while doing your research would have called themselves a teacher, or some of them?
Some of them would.
Mm.
The majority were from the outdoors sector.
Okay.
So actually they weren't.
No,
they were
okay.
facilitators or practitioners.
But that in itself is fascinating, isn't it? That there's that perspective is already changed. You know, if you work in the outdoors, you are a practitioner or a facilitator. It just is a more natural
Do you think, even like learning support assistants still have like an angle that with that kind of title? And just chucking the question across the room, as someone who's done home education with their children, how do you view yourself? Because I don't think you have any. You're a facilitator.
Yeah,
you have no formal qualifications in teaching.
Got a politics degree, which is very helpful. No, but yeah, I mean, in the home ed world, we all call ourselves facilitators because we're facilitating learning, and all the resources are there. We're just guiding them to follow their interests and find the resources that they need. Mm-hmm. And it's all the skills that me and Shev spoke about last time, like how to assess sources, how to make sure the information you're getting is reliable, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then,
metacognitive.
So then you're looking at, if you're looking at the division between school and not school, then it sounds like maybe the issue is, maybe it is a language, part of it's a language issue.
Well, if we're trying to make a cultural shift, like that is part of the solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think going back to what Tom said about the triangle of trust, it's actually sort of mirrored what's come out in my research. But instead of being practitioner, learner and the environment, it's the environment, the business and the practitioner. And so there's another triangle there that needs to be addressed and thought about.
Because you've got, in a lot of places, a boss that wants results, and that is often a numerical result.
Yeah.
So how do you factor that in?
Yeah, and that management, business, organisation aspect of it needs to be communicating what they're expecting to the practitioner, but also the practitioner needs to be able to communicate about how they can do that or what they need to be able to do that. And I think the open conversation is really important.
I agree. I think it's that from that kind of business perspective, it's more about going, this is the problem we're trying to solve.
Yeah.
but then it's up to the practitioner to have that input on how that is solved.
But as we're getting business into education, like we're here as a business in education.
Multi-academy trusts.
But are these businesses set up with the proper credentials of education, and are they really thinking about their pedagogy
and the welfare of the kids and the staff?
Are they coming from that angle, or are they just trying to do the management of the school and run it efficiently, like put efficient business practices into management, but not necessarily the pedagogy, and that is not necessarily a healthy connection that's happened there.
Is this something that you observed in your research, a reflection on the disparity between what they're trying to achieve with a learner versus the management?
Yeah, I think the difficulty was trying to sometimes know what was the aim was.
So it was a communication issue?
Yeah, so knowing what the aim was and not having necessarily a clear aim as to what they were trying to deliver looks like. But at the same time, it's kind of intrinsic with outdoor learning, and it's kind of like, well, if you employ the right people, they know what that is. And it's about having that. And then there's people who know what it is, but they can't deliver it because they're being restricted by the management or restricted by the environment. And then on the flip side, it's like getting that. I think for working with children with autism, so sort of refocusing back with that, it's the team and it's not the individual practitioner. It's the whole team and how they work together, and actually the team around the learner, and then how that team works together and the communication within that team. They're not always necessarily the best person, but they make the best team.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's really important moving forward for businesses and for education, is to think about their learners and what do their learners need, and what do their learners need from that team of people that's going to be working with them. And yes, they may not be the person with the highest qualifications, but we've all had, those of us who've been to university have all had lecturers who are really intelligent that can't lecture, you know. So it's actually, when we pull it all back, it's like, actually we need to make sure that the teams work and communicate together, and that reduces their stress because they understand each other, they understand what they're good at, they respect each other.
Do you think that do you think even when that works as a team, there's still a stress in that there's a disconnect between a very kind of rigid and set curriculum against the intrinsic nature of outdoor learning, and trying to marry the two is always difficult? Do you think that adds stress there, or do you think that actually having that team really cohesive overcomes that as a barrier?
I think most of it is overcome by having that cohesive team. I think that's the real takeaway from my research, has been that the staff and the support of each other has been the real key factor for people in reducing or improving their well-being and making the challenges that they do face worthwhile. I think the curriculum is a challenge. It's always going to be a challenge. There's never going to be a perfect curriculum. I think I kind of parroted what you said, Shev, in an earlier podcast. But it's never going to be one size fits all. And in fact, it's one size fits no one, pretty much. And so it kind of, I mean, around 25% of some schools are made up of special educational needs learners.
Yeah.
How can
where
75?
I'm governor, there's 23%.
Yeah. How can it be okay to have a curriculum that works for just 75%.
And
Well,
probably not even all of them.
No.
I think actually beyond that, I think just the concept of a national education system that intrinsically accepts a failure rate is just makes no sense to me. Like, how can we just knowingly write off people as just part of the collateral damage of the system? Like, surely you need to go back and make the system work for everyone.
Pawns in a game, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you get that right, then you don't even have SEND learners.
Yeah.
Because everyone's needs are being met.
Yeah.
That's if you get the system right, that whole issue
I think
kind of goes away.
I think that comes into the part of that thing does come back to that team of those teams being able to respond back. So my question, just chucking it back there, because I think Shev is right. If we get it right, then the SEND starts to disappear more and more. So what do the effective teams look like to you? Because I know in the kind of hierarchy and the structure of the company, there are some people really high performing, all different positions in the company, and they are really, really effective practitioners. And I've got my ideas of what they look like and how they respond to challenges and how they communicate in their teams. And I just wondered, what your perspective is and how that kind of, I'm just interested if it matches up with what I've observed.
Yeah, so I think it starts with respect. It's got to start with respect for each other, and respect for and self-awareness. So knowing what you are good at, what you aren't as good at, or what someone else is better at, and feeling comfortable to ask those people who are maybe better at you for help or for training or tips on things that would work.
Kind of being able to reflect as a team.
So reflecting as a team. So one of the things that I observed was the fact that something had happened and it didn't quite go as planned, which happens pretty much every day. And as a team, the group I was with were able to look back at it and go, okay, why didn't it work? What could we have done better? But then refocused and went, but what did the learners get out of the day? Okay, well actually they got something out of the day. It's not what we intended them to get out of the day, but we got some stuff, and so it was a successful day. And actually when you've got like a curriculum that you've got a long list of targets, or a business that has certain key performance indicators that they're trying to meet, then sometimes getting something is not enough. Whereas actually we should be comparing getting something to getting nothing, which is what's happening for a lot of the learners without it.
Yeah, it's shifting that focus, isn't it? I remember in my teacher training, I was talking about lesson observations. You've got the grading criteria from like outstanding to requires improvement, and my lecturer said if you get someone observing your lesson and they start with requires improvement and work all the way through the criteria, you will never get a good. If you have someone who starts with outstanding and crosses them off as you miss them, you'll always get good. And it's that shift in perspective makes a big difference to kind of.
But I also think it's that self-awareness of, for example, teachers working with learning support assistants. If the learning support assistant has got loads of experience baking, let them lead the cookery lesson.
Yeah. So it's like kind of leaving the ego out of the team.
There's a humility element, right?
I think it's that authenticity and passion in there, allowing that to shine through. Like you're saying, if you're into baking, bake. If you love music, if you love art, poetry, puppets, whatever the thing is, storytelling, reading. Bring it in.
Yeah, and the learners. So someone I was speaking to said that they have a group that comes weekly and they don't always have the same leader. But they said the ethos is the same, but every leader brings something different because of what they're interested in.
Definitely.
And actually that was fine. You know, he's manager of a company and he was quite happy for that to happen, because that's about showing them passion, showing the learners that it's okay to be interested in different things, and that there's not
strength, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it can, you know, someone might just suddenly, you know, you start talking about something slightly different, get them talking about things in a slightly different way, and you suddenly realise that that's what's really key for them.
Well, I think this goes back to my thing that I'm trying to push more in the company of, like, it takes a whole village to raise a child, and it's having those different approaches and those different perspectives and those different strengths and weaknesses, and it's also, you know, where something isn't your strength, it's also going, well, I'm struggling with this too, you know, and learning alongside the learner, and
I was
just
just about to say, if modelling is like the key to parenting and educating, then that's another great thing to do, right? To say to the kids, actually, let's go and ask.
I mean, if education is for life, then it needs to reflect life, and that's exactly what it is. And
I think that comes from a lot of what you're saying about the kind of humility and the team and the passion. If you put the learner at the heart of what's going on, and you go on that journey with them, rather than the curriculum at the heart of what's going on, then you don't get that, because I think a lot of that ego comes from, well, I'm a qualified teacher and I'm here to deliver the curriculum, and you're here to support, and it creates a hierarchy, doesn't it? Whereas if you go, actually the learner is absolutely central to all of this, then everyone has an input and everyone goes on that journey, and it levels that hierarchy completely, which allows the team to kind of function with that humility. And that well-being of staff, like the hierarchy, is going to be one of the causes of stress, right? Someone in the background going, well, I know I could do that better than they did, but they didn't ask me because they know that they're in charge. So you're coming back to your original topic of how it benefits the staff. Presumably that's all linked into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also the person's background. So for a lot of outdoor education or outdoor learning, people have done something else beforehand, and it's about integrating that into the education and the learning that's taking place, and but also making them aware that by putting the learner as the centre, maybe some of those things that they learn in education or the way they learn in education doesn't really apply now, and actually getting out of your own head and getting out of your own ideas about what something should look like by allowing the learner to guide you and your facilitation, and, you know, go off on tangents about different things. That's
so true. It's this illusion of control, isn't it? So you actually, beyond keeping a learner safe, we should, we don't really have any control. We shouldn't have.
Also, we don't have any reason to need to control.
No, exactly. That's it.
Safe.
And when you stop leading learning and you just start learning with everyone else that's also learning, you don't need control, and that's a big shift for people to make. But
and I think also the idea of demanding respect. It was something again mentioned at the conference. Going back to this,
I think it was Andy or Michael. They did talk about that in their podcast with us as well, about why should you respect someone if they just come and introduce themselves.
Well, I think that's about time, and that's about the authenticity and that trust, isn't it? It's all kind of interlinked, and if it's like, I'm the head teacher and this is bad and this is wrong, and then and that's for the staff and for the pupils, I think, as well. And I think it's the whole culture that creates.
Yeah, and as you know, that's a key thing for the team, isn't it? That, like, you are employed to do a role, but actually you need to be aware of which aspects of that role you're really good at, and actually come help me, come see how I do it. but there are going to be always some aspects of that role that you're kind of like, really could do with a bit of help with this, or I'm not quite getting this, or this is not how I used to do it. How do I do it and learn with them? The amount of respect you get from learners by saying, I don't know, let's have a look.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's find out together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's work this out because I don't know, or isn't that really cool? No idea what it is.
Yeah.
Like quite often I do that, with friends' kids, or like with bugs on the beach or whatever, and you're just like, look at this, isn't it cool? And they're like, what is it? I was like, don't know, just really cool, just pretty stone, don't know what it's made of, or whatever it is. And it's like that kind of being in awe of things.
And that is facilitating, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's starting a line of inquiry with them alongside.
Yeah.
Going, shall we go on this journey of discovery?
Yeah, but I think that's that feeling of awe is I think like really, really key to learning. Is that like, wow, like it's like an emotional.
We're not happy, do we? We need to.
It's that happiness, and it's also, I don't know. There needs to be room for feeling and emotion in this, and I don't think that's given enough space. And I feel like that feeling of awe builds connection and builds that inquisitivity. Is that a word?
Yeah, I think so.
Inquisitivity. Good.
It's now.
Well, it's been a long day. But I feel like there's an emotion, that drive, and that comes from like a point within, and where's the initial like point where learning kind of starts for someone on a journey for a project or what have you, and it's like, where does it?
I think it allows you to be your authentic self, doesn't it?
Yes.
And if you can do that, then there's no fear of failure. It removes all of that out there, because you just want to find out.
I was just about to say, it all links
wrong.
into failure and growth mindset, because if you've said, I don't know what it is, then they know that in the future
Yeah,
they can
exactly.
say, I don't know, can you help
But
me?
it's following that intrinsic motivation to learn, isn't it?
Yeah.
And where
Yeah.
if you pull that like I want to learn thread all the way back to like the deepest, darkest part of your psyche in the cave somewhere of learning, but like hit this rock with a hammer or this stone or that stone, like where does that initial feeling of like safety and security, and like how has that helped our race progress? And then if we can get learning that starts from those points that are all like well hardwired within us, and expand outwards from that in a more constructive way rather than from how a factory and society work, then perhaps we could make an education system that is getting rid of Sen kind of need.
And has healthier staff, right, that are less stressed and less likely to quit education.
That would be fantastic if we could
going
do all of
back
that in one quick fix.
But I think that happens though, just because you're removing all the barriers then, aren't you? You don't have the pressure of this is what you've got to teach in this time scale. You allow staff to bring their passion and their experience, and to build a team around them that provides support. And so you want your staff team to be doing exactly what you're trying to deliver for the learners. They need a growth mindset, they need an idea of collaboration, they need a sense of awe and wonder, they need a sense of inquiry, they need to be lifelong learners.
And you just wonder, like, if a genius like Isaac Newton popped into our education system, like, would they have been allowed that, like to follow like lines of study and inquiry? Like, would they have ever been able to produce the kind of work they did? Because they obviously had a completely different education back then. But he managed it, standing on the shoulders of giants, what have you. But are we being those shoulders, as our education being those shoulders for our learners? I think to a limited extent, but I think we
could do a lot better, and we owe a lot more to future generations than we're currently giving them.
Yeah, that's a nice way to end.
Are we finished?
Well, We're all very busy people. So, Rosie, I was just going to say, is there anything else you wanted to tell us or you wanted to ask? Or you got the boys as a captive audience before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I just found it so inspiring doing this research.
Yeah.
And all the people that I've met and chatted to, like, to know that there are people out there who feel the same as me,
yeah,
who want people of neurodiverse brains to be able to achieve what they can achieve, whether that's outside or not.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, being outside is helpful. For some people it's a real challenge.
Yeah.
But sometimes that challenge is an important one to be able to manage, even if you can't overcome it. You know, we have to, in our lives, go outside. You know, it's very difficult not to. So, you know, learning to be outside, learning that there are good things outside, not being scared of going outside the front door is really important.
Yeah.
Not just for the learners, but for the parents of those learners.
Yeah.
And for the teachers to be able to do that in schools would be amazing. For the facilitators that are already doing it outdoors, it's great.
Yeah.
And I think, I've changed the word again, but there is a difference.
Yeah.
And I think we need to narrow that gap between teachers and facilitators for outdoor learning. It's totally inspired me. It's given me a much better understanding of my practice, and the diversity within autistic learners.
Yeah.
And how actually, for my practice, every learner is an individual. And when you start seeing every learner like that, it doesn't matter what label they're given. You find out what makes them tick, and you go with that.
Awesome. And Shev and Tom, did you want to ask Rosie anything or have anything else to say before we close up?
No, nothing to ask, but just a huge thank you. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I feel like we could have done it like 3 times as long, but I
Yeah,
thought it might
no,
be good
it's
to
been
wrap
amazing.
up.
The thing is,
It's been really cool.
We
with
could have part
that 3
2.
times as long kind of bit, is there
Oh dear.
is there anywhere we can go to, you know, to the people or organisations or books that if people are interested in subjects brought up in here, is there anything you can, come along in your research and would be helpful for people to look at?
Yeah, so a summary of my research is going to be on my blog, Rosie's Ramblings.
I'll put that in the show notes.
And also, I mean, in terms of Nature Connection, the Nature Connectedness Research Group that's run by Professor Miles Richardson is just amazing. I'm constantly following them on all the social media. There aren't a lot of there isn't a lot of research out there about what we've been chatting about. That was the reason for doing the research. Quite scarily, one of the articles that's been really important, which is called Engaging Children on the Autistic Spectrum with the Natural Environment, was written in 2013.
I was about to say, is it really old?
Yeah, it was nearly 10 years ago that Blakesley and team wrote it, and that was sort of commissioned by Natural England for a project that they were doing about increasing nature learning in schools, and we're still having the same conversation now. And I was rereading the research this morning going, I'm finding exactly the same things. So what has happened in the last 10 years? And actually a lot has happened with organisations like you guys, who are 10 years old now. But actually there's a lot still to happen.
It's
and
the
that's
beginning
really
of the journey,
important.
isn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, let's plug while we're here. We do run Learning Beyond the Classroom courses. So check out our website for those courses, and we can run CPDs for schools looking to get learners outside more. And also, if there are any other people out there doing research, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you, Rosie.
Thank you all three of you for your time today. I know it's a very hot day and you're all very busy, so thank you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
And good luck with writing your dissertation.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Rather you than me in this week.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Finally, I'm going to ask all of my podcast guests these questions, and I've already asked Tom and Shev, so today it's Rosie's turn. So my first question, Rosie, is how do you relax?
So I'm a life of two halves at the moment.
Yeah.
So I've got my research on one hand and then work on the other. So when I'm doing my research, I'm sort of quite screen based. So going for a walk in the woods.
Yeah.
Just getting outside. Generally stopping in the woods and just being under a tree and just being outside.
Bit of downtime.
Yeah. And I play badminton once a week. With like a community group, so that's just a little bit of like a totally different social space, which is cool. So I do that on both sides. When I'm at work, I'm outdoors all the time, so the downtime is more sort of colouring and sort of reading and just sort of inside, kind of chilled out, not doing a lot.
Oh, nice. That sounds like you've got the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And what are you reading or listening to right now? So that could be music or podcasts or anything.
So podcast wise, apart from the outdoors group podcast, it's sort of, I just dip in and out of different things as they come up. But I'm currently reading The Bone Code by Kathy Reichs.
Oh, awesome.
So I am, I like crime fiction. So that's my escapism sort of reading.
And finally, this is our big one. Why is being outdoors important to you?
It grounds me, and it's real, and it's inspiring, and it's ever changing and adapting. And I can do the same walk from my house every day and something different happens. And I see something different or hear a different bird or butterfly or whatever it is, and something else attracts my attention. And it's just, there's an awe and wonder about nature that you can't get from anything else.
Yeah, I totally agree. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time again, Rosie, and for telling us all about your work. I'm really excited to read the findings.
No, it's nearly there now.
Excellent. And I'm sure that we can get you back in the future to talk about some other bits and pieces as well. If you'd like that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
Brilliant. Awesome. Thank you, Rosie.
Thank you.
Thank you. A huge thank you again to Rosie for taking some time out of her busy schedule writing her dissertation to talk to us about the Masters that she's been undertaking and the work that she's been doing. We really enjoyed talking to you. And to those of you listening, this is the last episode in the first series of the Outdoors Group podcast. We hope that you've enjoyed listening to this series as much as we've enjoyed making it. We're just taking a break for the summer and we'll be back in September. And we've already got some really exciting episodes lined up for you guys to listen to. So catch up on any that you've missed from this season so that you're all ready to go with our second season in September. In the meantime as well, if you could rate us, subscribe, like and share, that would be amazing. We'd really appreciate your support in getting our podcast out there to more parents and educators interested in outdoor education and forest schools. Finally, if you have got something that you would like to share with us, or a topic that you think we should be covering, or you'd like to come and talk to us about something that you're passionate about, please do get in touch with us. We would absolutely love to hear from you. You can find us on our social media channels at the Outdoors Group, or you can drop us an email at marketing@outdoorsgroup.co.uk, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. That's all for now, so have a fantastic summer, and we'll see you again. Well, we'll talk to you again in September. Thanks very much.